Okay, hello everyone. So a year and a half ago in the previous seminar, I talked a little bit about CompMusic, and that was kind of the beginning of the project. This is a large project funded by the European Research Council. It's a 5-year one, and now we are on the third year, and things are starting to get clearer, and we have some results. It's impossible to talk about everything we're doing, so I try to just give some things related that I thought might be of relevant to some of the discussions that were happening yesterday. And of course, there is other presentations that are very much related to the project, and we heard Ajay, and tomorrow we're going to hear Hemamurti, and also Amin Chacho presented something yesterday. And so anyway, so there is quite a few things related to the project, and Andres' work also, we collaborate with him. So let me just, for the people that may not know about the project, just hint you a little bit about what we are doing. So basically we chose 5 music traditions. 5 music traditions that are classical traditions that are, let's say, quite well studied from a musicological point of view. And that was a very important consideration for us because we wanted to start from knowledge from music that we could build on. We are not doing ethnomusicology, we're not doing musicology, we are doing computational work. So we wanted to have a knowledge-based approach to computational. So we wanted to have as much knowledge of traditions that were not kind of the common ones that in MIR have been used. And the kind of the goal, or the easy to explain goal in a kind of an engineering project that we want to develop things that can be of use, is to think of the music exploration tools that most of us use to listen and navigate through music. So this is iTunes, and most of us like it very much, but our claim is that we can do much better than that. So how much better can we do, and the kind of research we do, how can improve this type of tools? And the work could be summarized with this slide, in which our work is basically the work of the middle of this middle box. But of course, in order to do this work, there is 2 very important components that at the end they have taken a lot of our effort. And hopefully by now we are quite okay so that we can focus more on what we wanted to start with. And and in fact I will put more emphasis on this, the issue of data gathering and the issue of evaluation. So the idea is that in order to carry our work, we needed to gather data. We do just data-driven work, and we needed to develop a way to evaluate our results. And clearly, given there is a quite complex type of research, of course, we can evaluate individual algorithms and individual experiments, but in order to evaluate a lot of the things we're doing, we need to do a user level evaluation. So we needed to develop a prototype through which users can interact with our research results. And our research focuses on 3 aspects of music. It focuses on the melodic issues, and mainly the concept of melodic patterns, on rhythmic issues, which is the ones that, of course, we will emphasize them more here, and the concept of semantic relationships. And basically, each one focuses on one type of research methodology. So we are working on signal processing and machine learning for mainly a lot of the melodic and rhythmic type of analysis. And one new area for us that we had not worked much, at least myself, is all the semantic analysis work and semantic web work that has been, or is, I think, very important for a lot of these establishing meaningful semantic level relationships among the concepts and things we deal with. So let me now basically talk a little bit about this data gathering, and I will then basically show the prototype that we have, and hopefully we'll have some time to explain a little bit of some concrete work. So the first issue was the concept of corpus, and I guess in some disciplines that's a quite clear concept, but in MIR, when I started, I guess I felt that it was not so clear. So we had to kind of establish what we were talking about. So an important thing, and people get confused between data sets, corpus, collections, and things like this. So for us, a research corpus is the concept of a representative subset of data from the real world, from which we can study that particular reality. So in our case, a particular musical repertoire, a particular musical style. So of course, it's impossible to, from data, capture the whole context, the whole music culture that we are studying, but we are aiming to define a corpus in a way that covers that reality. Clearly, a corpus evolves and grows, and we keep developing the collections and improving them and gathering more data with the contributions for a lot of people. And then another thing is the data sets, the test data sets. So when we develop an algorithm, we do an experiment, and we want to have some data to validate that experiment, kind of what is also called the ground truth. That's we build data sets that are tuned for a particular task and for a particular experiment. So that's very much specific problem dependent, and they are normally annotations developed by users, and that takes quite a bit of effort on developing these data sets. And these data sets, they do not have to be inside the corpus. I mean, sometimes these data sets, we gather specific data for a particular problem, and it may not be part of the corpus. And even it may be outside the corpus, because sometimes you need to do a synthetic sort of voice or a synthetic kind of type of pattern to test something. So a test data set might not be inside even the real world of the repertoires that we want to study. Okay, our work is mainly audio driven, so that means that our corpus is, the core of the corpus are the audio recordings. So the gathering of our corpus started basically from defining these recordings. And we have gathered collections from all these 5 repertoires. Of course, you could argue whether they are big enough or not, and depends, of course, on the type of problems. We are quite happy. I think with the recordings we have, we can do quite a lot, and that's what we have started with. Most of them come from commercial recordings, so easily accessible and that people can have access, except the Arab Andalusian, which is basically a means collection that he has been collecting for a long time, and it has been great to have him in the team. So we have been able to collect a lot of recordings from that tradition, because there is not that many commercial recordings available. And I don't have time, of course, to go over every single corpus. Let me just put one example of one corpus and the kind of issues that we have dealt with, so that then we can extrapolate to the other collections. So let me talk about the Carnatic Corpus, which maybe is the one that is more mature and the one we have been working the most on. And there's a lot of things that we needed to address in order to develop a corpus like that. And some that are very specific. So for example, in the Carnatic music, the unit of concert is a fundamental unit, not so much the piece, or not so much some other kind of form that can unify the corpus. So in fact, when you buy CDs, most of the CDs are recordings of full concerts. Okay, so that was a very important thing, that normally when you think about a collection, you think of CDs as the unit, or you think of songs as the unit. So here, clearly, we had to define the concept of the unit that we wanted to use, and that was that. For example, another important thing is that Carnatic music is mainly vocal in terms of the leading instrument, and even if it's there is another instrument used as the lead instrument, the voice is kind of the type of reference that you want to imitate, or that has been traditionally a fundamental driving force. So our corpus is mainly, we have focused mainly on vocal concerts. A very difficult issue of building a corpus, you cannot gather everything, of course. So how do you establish some reference to decide that what your corpus includes is representative of and covers enough of that reality that we want to study? So we have tried in every repertoire to come up with some reference that we can compare with. So for example, in Carnatic music, there is the Madras Music Academy, which has been the key reference for defining a lot of the criteria behind this music tradition in terms of who is a good singer, or what is a concert, or they have been for many, many decades being an important influential force. So basically we use them, and we use the festivals that they organize as a way to compare if our corpus was representative and at what level of that music tradition. And we have a paper that makes that point. So the commercial recordings, the commercial releases we got, and the editorial metadata, we use that reference as sort of to compare always our corpus to see how it was representative. Of course, another important thing for corpus, for research, is that we would like to have open data. So we like to have data that can be shared by the research community. And as we all know, in music, that's a huge headache, and is the biggest, I would say, the biggest roadblock for a lot of research is to have access to data. So for the audio, that has been a problem. So our solution has been, okay, let's work on commercial recordings that are in the market that can be easily available, and also put some effort in recording or establishing some collaborations with concert halls and people that can put those recordings under Creative Commons on a line available. And we're doing that, and we're going to do I think we're going to have a pretty decent collection of Carnatic music. We already have one on Arab Andalusian music, so that means openly available music on the Internet Archive, which is a collaborator that we have, that it's a good repository for these types of collections. For the editorial metadata, we use Music Brains, and that has been a very important collaboration again. That's a nice framework for audio metadata. Of course, it was originally mainly focused for Western pop music, let's say, but we have been collaborating with them to extend their framework and all the kind of sort of database structure that they have, so that we can put the concepts like ragas, talas, or the specific forms and instruments that we deal with. And well, we use references for metadata that are specifically for a culture. And this applies to, of course, every tradition would be different. Some traditions would have the issue of scores, like the Turkish Maqam, and we had done a very good work on collaborating with people that have good collections of scores, that we're making it public, and their Creative Commons too, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, the corpus of Carnatic music includes all these sort of the data around the audio recording, which is basically the recordings, the metadata, and the lyrics and scores around that recording. In the case of Indian music, the scores are not so relevant, so we haven't paid much attention on the concept of the scores. On other traditions we have. Lyrics are important, so we are putting a lot of emphasis. And then, I haven't talked much about that, but it's all the issue of the semantic data. That is all the information surrounding that, forums discussing that, for a lot of analysis that we want to do on characterizing this music that comes from the community, from the subjective aspects of the community. Okay, so things like every corpus, we have developed kind of methodology to define if it's good or not, that corpus. So the concept of coverage and completeness are two very important concepts. And this is the kind of things that I was mentioning about checking, for example, comparing with specific collections that exist, what is the kind of the coverage, what is compared our collection with those sources. And for example, the concept of completeness is also a very important one. So for every recording we have, how much contextual information, editorial information we have? Do we have the names of the raga, the tala, the accompanying artists, and all that? So anyway, so we have done all that, and it's all that published, and you can check on that. And then another important concept was the data sets that I mentioned. And there is some data sets that we have been collecting specifically for rhythm that are all available online, and you can have access to that. And this is a work by Ajay, and we have a pretty good annotated database of Carnatic music for the rhythm analysis, for tala tracking, some analysis. And actually did a great work on putting together a collection of strokes on madranga, and that's all available in free sound. And I guess this is part of the work that Hema will talk about on onset detection. So this can be very useful for or ball recognition. So that's a very good data set for some research. And then finally, all these corpuses, or the corpora, are available. Some are not completely yet available through Dunya, through the API. And there is an API that you can have access to that. You can access this corpus through our browser that I'm going to just briefly mention. And then you can also use it through an API. And then for computational work, it's great to use that and be able to analyze all the collection. So we have, apart from the recordings, we have all the features that we have analyzed and all the editorial metadata from a single point entry from the API, so, and all the annotations that we have. So let me go through a little bit the website that we have developed. This is Dunya. Is online. It's available. You can log in. We have to give you permit to get in because of all the copyright issues of the recordings. And this is, for example, the collection of Carnatic music, in which you can navigate through sort of music-specific concepts, and you can search for the ragas, the talas, the artists. With the idea of the concert, you can navigate through these, and then you can go directly to one recording. Let me just, for example, play one recording. So in here, we already are displaying quite a lot of the analysis that we have done, like the pitch histograms, so that you can see the swaras and where the pitch is. This is the pitch analysis. We detect the tonic, so we can see everything relevant to the tonic. We detect the aksara pulse, sort of the beat of the song. And then you can look for similar recordings based on raga similarity. So, for example, you can search for recordings that might have the same swara distribution in the pitch histogram. So, and it will return a particular recording for that. And this is the publications we have done related to rhythm. So they're all available online. And so we have done some work on meter analysis and inference, and so there is a lot of collaboration with Andre on some of that, and Jay that have collaborated. And we have work on the detection of patterns and detecting, analyzing percussive instruments. And these are the last ones are the papers on the corpora. So we already have one paper per corpora describing what this per corpus, so explaining what. And to finish, in here we're going to talk about the Turkish Maqam. We talked about the Arab Andalusia, and the only tradition that we have not talked about is the Chinese one. And I wanted to give a little. I wanted Ajay to tell us just very briefly about one particular paper that we are presenting at Izmir that relates with the topic that yesterday was not very popular and no one wanted to talk about, which was the issue of syllabic representations for rhythm characterization, which I think is very important in some of these traditions, like in the Chinese music. Let's hear that while let's ask Jay to. Can we have the music?
So what you heard, what you did not hear was the initial percussion pattern that was played when the sound wasn't there. So I'll play it again anyway. So the main thing is, so Beijing Opera is a theatrical art form, and then the music is only one aspect of the whole experience. But then the music has a lot of important rhythmic and melodic aspects which we are studying. And one thing which I'll describe here would be the syllabic percussion patterns, which are very central to Beijing Opera. Beijing Opera is very rhythmic, which means that the percussion ensemble, which is a part of the ensemble, it has a very important role in defining the music structures. And one important thing among that is the percussion patterns. And these percussion systems in this case, so I'm talking in general here about the cultures that we study, they're all mnemonics. They're mainly used for oral transmission of music for pedagogy, mainly. And they, in that case, they define and describe some of the percussion patterns. And they also have an important role in many aspects of defining rhythm. And the best aspect of them is that they provide a language for percussion, and which has a very clear analogy to the way we speak and language, which means that it could be explored as a musically meaningful representation for a lot of MIR tasks. And they also, in a way, encode the subtleties that come along with in articulation, timbre, and dynamics, which make them very ideal candidates. And it's not only, of course, this is Hindustani music from Dr. Clayton's book, where you see the syllables which define the tal, and then we saw yesterday about Turkish music, where there are syllables. So I will just go to percussion patterns in Beijing Opera, for which we need to know the instruments used. I'll just play very quick, short examples. So this is one of the instruments. It's called the ban. So this is like the conductor, and then that's one that you heard in the recording. So let me just play a percussion pattern, which will kind of clear up all the instruments here. So let's go to this, and then I'll come back. So this is a percussion pattern in Beijing Opera. So this is the one I showed you yesterday, but probably you can listen to it today. So what we saw is this would be learned in the way the syllables are written there. It's long, dong, ida, ita, quang te, chiet te, quang te, and then there's a repetition for n number of times, and then the pattern ends. So it's actually a sequence of strokes by a combination of instruments, mainly 5 instruments that we saw in the previous slide. And they are used to mark important structural points in the aria. And then what makes them very nice is that they are limited in number. There are only a limited set of patterns that are played, and they're well defined, which means that we can use it as a first case if we want to study percussion patterns before we move on to other traditions which have ill-defined percussion patterns. And so the final task that we wanted to look at was transcription and classification. So given an audio recording, how do you transcribe it into its syllables? And then given the syllables, how do you say which pattern it is? And so we have some preliminary results. I don't know if we have time to go through that. We worked on 5 different percussion patterns. And then, one of the important aspects, which probably we'll also discuss if we use that in one of the sessions, is to make sure that these syllables, which are musically defined, well defined, into an engineering formulation with which we can work and then do some MIR work. So that was one of the main focuses, and then so that's where we ended up with this kind of the mapping scheme, which I'll probably discuss later on now. But the basic idea is a typical speech recognition kind of a framework wherein you have a training data and then you train an HMM, and then given a new feature, you extract the new test pattern, you extract the features out of it, and then do a speech recognition kind of decoding. Would work equally well for a percussion pattern. So this is one of the things which kind of is surprising, but also is very nice. And so this is very basic, though it can be extended to include a lot of musical aspects of the music tradition. So, I mean, the results are pretty good, in fact. One thing is, of course, it gives a similar confusion which we see with phonemes and then phones. So, like, the basic summary is that, of course, we can use oral syllables as a means of representation. Beijing Opera is just a study case. And then it has a clear analogy to speech and language, which is a thing which we can exploit to study these percussion patterns. And of course, we'll explore extensions mainly to Carnatic and Hindustani music, which have bowls and salkatu, which we heard from Akshay yesterday. Yeah, thank you. That's
okay, and basically, if you, well, we cannot talk about anything else, but if you have, if you want to know more, there is quite a bit of information on all the articles, and Dunya, this interface that we are developing, of course, is still work in progress. And if you want to have access to a lot of these data sets and corpus are available except the recordings, but if you're interested in the recordings, we can definitely share with you and have you access to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Xavier and Ajay. I should clarify, there was actually a lot of interest on the topic of syllables, but bad overlap with the first discussion topic that was proposed for today, but it's still on the schedule for Wednesday, yeah? So okay. We should definitely pick that up. There is maybe time for a quick question? Yes?
Regarding the subject of collections, I was just wondering in how far, I mean, there have been so many projects about digitalization of existing libraries, like the British Library, Phonogram Archive in Vienna, and so on and so on. And how is the state of being able to communicate between all these formats? I mean, there are some thoughts about doing that, but are you aware of
format at what level?
You digitize something, you do some metadata annotations. The question is now, for example, how to access data or collections in things in one collection and make them maybe communicate with formats in another place. So are there any projects thinking about that?
No, I don't think so. Well, not that I know. I mean,
yeah.
And first of all, the accessibility, I just wondering how many of these collections are really accessible. Some you can get access by, they would lend it to you by going to the place and giving you a very small access, but really openly available collections that can be shared, and therefore you can share everything.
At least on a streaming basis, yes.
On a streaming, yeah, but if you really want to do analysis in the way streaming would not work.
Yeah, but let's just assume you want to access music just for listening.
Oh, for listening. Okay, yeah, for listening.
But then you still would need some API, speaking in engineering terms, to possibly make that access a little bit more easy.
Well, there is a lot of issues here, not just that one. One that we are really working on, and hopefully also this year, I think we're going to announce something that I think is relevant, is the standardization of the references of all these recordings. And for us, the Music Brains should be the way to standardize the identifiers for the artists, because there is a problem of names of artists, names of the pieces in all these different languages. So for example, we maintain the original language of the Chinese and of the Arab together with the transliterated versions, having the same identifiers for all these things so that we can really talk to them in a unified way. So we have really tried to push for Music Brains as the unified place where, or the identifiers where then everything can talk to each other. But of course, in Music Brains, a lot of these repertoires are not there. So we had to put everything ourselves. We have spent a lot of effort in putting everything ourselves. But if things are available, they don't have to be commercial recordings. If they are available and then someone puts effort in putting as a bootlegs and they put the metadata there, I think that's the best way to have a unified central point and the API that supplies plus other resources for doing that. But
well, thank you very much. Thanks all the speakers in the session again.